test week, and we are just a couple of days away from Ireland's first game against South Africa as part of a two-match series, and the excitement is building nicely. I'm Will Slattery. Welcome to this week's episode of the Left Wing Podcast. I'm delighted to be joined in studio by Luke Fitzgerald and on the line by our man in South Africa, Ruaidhri O'Connor. And Ruaidhri, we'll go to you first. You might be able to set the scene a bit first about what's it like down there. The atmosphere seems to be building really, really well. I saw just before we started here, the Springboks had tweeted out this kind of hype video to really get people's excitement building. They're definitely kind of leaning into that side of it. I know you've been at Rassie Erasmus' press conference, even about as well. Ireland have done a bit of media kind of too. How would you set the scene for us?
Yeah, like it's hard actually. Like where I'm staying is and Luke will know this because he would have stayed in Santon in 2009. Like it feels like you're in Dubai or somewhere completely divorced from the rest of South Africa. It's like a high-end hotel. The team are staying here as well, right beside a really it's like Dundrum on steroids. It's like a massive shopping mall, and like there's lots of box jerseys on display and stuff, and there's plenty of people milling around. But the hype is more coming from the box themselves and the kind of stuff that they've been coming out with in their camp. Certainly, you watch, you have the Euros on in the background here. Every ad break, they're building. Like it is the big event here next weekend, and there's definitely a sense that this is going to be a big set of games that people are excited for them, and like they sold out within minutes as soon as the tickets went on sale. These two games sold out, and like we've all seen the empty stadiums for the South African URC games. Like this is very different. So. It's number, as Rassie keeps telling us, it's number one versus number two. It's the world champions against the team that they seem to think that everyone in Ireland is saying that they're the best, that Ireland are the best team in the world, even though I haven't heard anyone in Ireland say that for a long, long time. And it's spicy. Like Ireland are doing their best not to say anything that will get them, that will even come close to what South Africa are saying. Where South Africa are just every press conference they're throwing something out there. They're niggly. They're saying stuff about the Irish players. It's just been it's been fun to cover and it's been fun to listen to. I get the sense that it's getting under Ireland's skin a little bbit. I mean, Rassie naming the team on Saturday or having a go with naming the Irish team, maybe being a bit close to the bone. I think I'd say it'd be interesting to see if he was right on, but. There's a little bit of paranoia around the Ireland training centre today. They're always fairly tight about access, but I mean, they were going to fairly extreme lengths to make sure no one was watching today. So I guess they're behind enemy lines and they're very much aware of that. And they feel like Rassie's spies are everywhere. So that's what being on tour in South Africa is like, I guess. And it's building nicely. Yeah,
it's funny, like Rassie, it's a tale of two coaches. Like Andy Farrell, myself and we were talking about this earlier in the day. Andy Farrell, I don't think has spoken to the media since Ireland won the Six Nations, so it's a couple of months now. He's going to be talking on Thursday when the team is named. But Rassie Erasmus, quite a media-friendly coach, obviously, as Rod mentioned, tweeting out as kind of his stab at the Ireland team, which looks pretty close to what I think a lot of people are expecting. And just, he's really trying to hype it up and kind of he's really leaning into that side of it. It's interesting to see the two contrasts between the two guys.
Probably doesn't take a genius to figure out the Irish team, in fairness, but there's probably only literally two or three positions that are up for grabs, probably. Look, he's an interesting character, isn't he? I mean, I think certainly, very emotional, and I think he's probably pretty. I was going to say he's high EQ, probably. Certainly, from a motivational standpoint, with his own players, he has his finger on the pulse there. He knows how to get them ready for the big games. My sense of him is that I think he's probably a little bit overblown as a coach. I think he's got the best resources of any of the coaches. He's got the best players to pick from. I still think they nearly botched that World Cup with their pre tournament selections and some of their selections in the World Cup. I think the best thing you can do with the South African team is probably just get out of their way, just pick the best players and just get on with it. Don't overthink it. But they seem to have this reputation for being, kind of two geniuses. And I haven't really seen any evidence of that outside of when they've been coaching South Africa, which I think have the best resources. Look, it's going to be a great battle. So that's just a little bit of a personal thing I'm dying to get off my chest.
That two geniuses line, I feel like teed up and ready to go.
No, I didn't. I just thought of it on the spot, to be honest. But I was just like, no, I want to set the record straight in that one. I'm yet to see the evidence of that outside of the South African team, who are brilliant, who are absolutely brilliant. Look, just in terms of the match, I think it's really spicy and I love that. I think it's going to be great. I think the atmosphere down in South Africa, it's going to be really tough for the Irish players to to get a result down there. But I think if it's the one place where I would have said probably New Zealand as well, but it's probably the other place where you go and you think like everything is stacked against you. Everything that could be stacked against you is stacked against you, and I think they can be unbelievably proud of themselves if they can dig out a series win here. I think it'll be something unbelievably special. And I do think, though, that the odds are probably against them. I think, Gibson Park and Keenan out of the backs makes it very challenging. I know we'll probably get into the specifics of it a little bit later on, but it's shaped up to be a brilliant test series. But I just don't know if Ireland will have the firepower against this South African team. I just think they're just... what comes off the bench, the challenges of playing away in South Africa, even though like a lot of our teams have played there recently, and the sheer quality of the opposition and the amount of quality, I just think it's such a big ask. I don't know about you. I mean, I think it has the makings of a great test series, but it also could be one of those ones where it could get ugly too. I think it has that potential. Like
one of those end of kind of season tours.
Yeah, it's
when I was growing up anyway, when they were all pretty much, two hammerings you take and then that'll be the end of the season. But obviously it's changed substantially in the last couple of tours. Ireland have been very successful, but some of the early days that I remember were tough, so it'll be interesting to see how this one goes. And Rud, just want to touch on something you mentioned about kind of the build-up over there, and you mentioned Ireland maybe being a bit paranoid behind enemy lines. Like, what do you make of how they're building up? Like, what would you say the mood from the Ireland camp is? As I mentioned, Andy Farrell hasn't spoken to the media. Like, they're not really setting the tone or getting their message out. Like, you could say, they're building quietly. It's a little meek, though, when you see South Africa really coming out and setting the narrative. Like, don't really know how Ireland are feeling or how they're set. Like, you're there. What can you tell us about that? Like, or what do you think about that kind of line of thought?
I get attention off them. There's definitely attention, and that can be a good thing. Like, that can be what's kind of got them kind of on it this week. You don't want to read too much into body languages and stuff, but if Andy Farrell, he's a very good way of spinning things, to kind of, the adversity thing that he always throws out there. And he's never used the people who are missing as an excuse, even when he's lost big players for big games in the past. But he can't have been, I'm sure the news that Gibson Park wasn't travelling, having already lost Keenan, that can't have made him any more confident about a tour that looked really difficult from the start. So, it depends on how much value you think there is in the media stuff before the game. Like, Rassie obviously puts a lot of store in it. Like, he plays clips from the Irish media to his players in the build-up to games. He puts a lot of thought into what he's doing. It's a joined-up approach. Like, that tweet didn't go out in isolation this evening, the video that he put out. That's part of a strategy that he has worked out. Whereas Farrell, while he's aware of what goes on in the media, he's good in the media himself. But they're very much about their process. It's a massive clash of cultures in the way they go about things. He doesn't want to stoke the flames. He wants the team's play to speak for itself. And that's kind of always been the Irish way. We've never had very bombastic teams or bombastic coaches. We've had good talkers, but it's never been the Irish way to kind of shout from the rafters about what they're doing. They've always wanted to let their play talk for them. Now, when they get in the pitch, they're well able to give and take. We've seen Peter O'Mahony say a few things that maybe came back to bite them at the World Cup, the Sam Cane line and stuff. But when they're in the media, they're very respectful, and I think that's what they think their fans want out of them. Look, I think the way the Springboks are building up to this is it's great for business. It's good for, it's like a prize fight. Like, they're just throwing out loads of stuff, and they're landing blows, and it's fun and it's enjoyable and stuff that we can get stuck into, and it drives engagement, for want of a better term. And Ireland want nice videos on their social media, on Instagram, of them going out and seeing lions and like players having a bit of a banter interview with each other, and it's all nicey. That's what they're into. And I don't think that strategy is going to change anytime soon, even if this series goes astray. But at the end of the day, if they lose this 2-0, it's not going to be really about what happened in the build-up. It's about the players that are on the pitch. And I think the fear is that even though they have a few injuries themselves, the Boks have a serious setup. Like, the 23 they've named today is a serious 23. 20 players were involved in a successful World Cup final only 8 or 9 months ago. And Ireland, the players look like they're running on empty a little bit. They have done a little bit since the Six Nations. I mean, they kind of finished, they started the Six Nations with their best performance, and they finished kind of running out of gas. The England performance was worrying. The Scotland performance wasn't much better. And then obviously there was a bit of a bounce in Leinster and the La Rochelle game, but they've suffered a lot of big, heavy defeats. And maybe that's the reason they're tense. But look, I went to Vision Access this morning, and you get the first 10 minutes, and you do a bit of filming and stuff, and then you're sent off. And we were sent to a room in the school they're working in. They put like little A4 papers, like hundreds of A4 pages up on the windows to stop us looking in at what was going on, even though there was no real scope for us doing anyway. So I went and got a coffee around the corner, and like briefly, there's a glimpse of a bit of grass from the training pitch as you walk around into the coffee shop. But I remember the security detail followed us into the coffee shop to see what we were up to. They'd spotted us that from afar, that we were like within range of training. Like there's just a tension. Like paranoia is too strong a word, but they definitely think they're being watched. There's a bit of nervous energy around them that I've picked up on, and it's interesting to see if that feeds into anything this weekend.
I think that's a good thing. I definitely think that's a good thing. And I would say, Ireland were pretty confident. There was a lot of good chat pre-World Cup, but I don't think any of that was misplaced. I think Ireland had a bad day out against New Zealand. I think these teams are actually when they're at full complement, I think very evenly matched actually. And let's not forget, Ireland are the last team to beat South Africa, and beat them in the World Cup. So I'd say that's kind of planted some kind of seed of doubt in the South Africans' mind, and I'd say they'd like to kind of banish that and kind of prove to themselves there's something for themselves to prove, and for the Irish team, I think you don't want to give too much energy to that. I mean, the South Africans have been coming up with all sorts of ways to try and motivate themselves, to try and get under the Irish team's skin. I would say Andy Farrell 100% is using all those things behind the scenes, but is trying to completely take the oxygen out of it outside of the setup, which I think is a smart thing to do. I don't think you need to give these guys any more motivation than they'll already have at home. And I think it's going to be key for them that if he is building it that way, if there's that nervousness, if there's that kind of bit of tension that they want to get out, that they don't lose their heads. I think the key thing about playing South Africa over there is that you actually don't do that. You don't play into that. You have to be unbelievably aggressive. The physical levels have to go to a new place. But where I always think that you're best playing against them is if you can withstand that, try and get some kind of parity at the physical stakes. But playing really, really smart is really, really important against them. You have to try and take the wind out of their sails in different parts of the game in different ways. I think you can also try and play into that physicality that they'll play in, that they'll have at home. They're liable to give away lots of penalties. They're liable to, have a high shot, possibly a red card or something like that. All those things are, I think, the probability of those things happening go up when South Africa are at home. So I think you have to just try and manage around those things well, while also, using the motivation to get up for it physically, because you can't compete if you don't get 50% on the physical stakes. You just can't compete there, I don't think. So I like the way Andy Farrell's playing this. I think he's taking a little bit of the steam out of it. Rassie will keep trying to kind of ramp it up during the week, but I continue to play it as Ireland have, and I kind of ignore it in the kind of public sphere.
Yeah, Ruaidhri, and as to their last two meetings under Rassie Erasmus that Ireland have won, they seem to have had a big impact on the South African players and management. They refer to it so much, and it is kind of the last unchecked box for this team. They won a Test series against the Lions. They've won back-to-back World Cups. They've beaten the All Blacks home and away. They've beaten every single team in World Rugby bar this Ireland team. So maybe that's why they're kind of fixated on it, because Dialende's come out with stuff about disrespect, and Colby's come out with stuff about disrespect, and it's interesting the way that how the rivalry is developed, because for me, the Ireland All Blacks rivalry that's mushroomed over the last couple of years is really based on pitch, really good games. They played, I think, 9 times since the summer of 2016 when Ireland went down to South Africa. Ireland have only played South Africa 3 times since then, one of which was under Alistair Coetzee. The Ireland-South Africa rivalry is just a lot of noise and a lot of talking between players and coaches. The All Blacks one has been based on the on-pitch kind of action. I've just found that interesting juxtaposition, because it feels like this is a big rivalry, but I'm actually thinking about the rugby. There's been not that many matches between the teams, considering the amount of talk that's come out of it.
Yeah, and there was such a build-up to the 2022 game in November because they were in the same pool, and then we had that epic pool game as well, which, in fairness, lived up to the hype. And I just remember the tension around the Stade de France that day. It felt like obviously it wasn't the final or anything near it, but the build-up to it was incredible. I mean, I think part of it's a social media thing. I mean, Ireland and South African fans have never been engaging with each other as much as they do now, on social media, and South Africans are fairly vociferous bunch on there. Our provinces obviously play against the South African teams all the time. I think that there's a clash of styles on the pitch. There's a clash of styles in the terms of how both teams or both countries approach rugby. And they are like ranked number 1 and 2 in the world. And for most of the last World Cup cycle, South Africa were the world champions, and Ireland, well, certainly the second half of the World Cup cycle, Ireland were ranked number 1 in the world and went and beat New Zealand. And I think South Africa came to Dublin fairly intent on kind of putting Ireland back in their box. Didn't work out. And you only have to look at the footage from the Chasing the Sun documentary around the World Cup game to understand how in Rassie's head Ireland were. Like, and he's now, like, that's the song. They're all singing Zombie Back at Us now, and they use Rassie as the chorus. But like, he was fixated on Ireland. And obviously the World Cup pool opponents, of course he was fixated on them. He wanted to beat them. But like, they were talking a lot about how Ireland wanted to be seen as the cleverest team in the world, that their game plan was so superior and complex that no one could figure it out. And Rassie was determined to kind of show that, it could be beaten by the South African game model. He tore strips off the team for not winning the game. Like, he used it as a way of bringing them right back down there. He called out Sia Khaleesi in a team meeting afterwards, and was happy to put this out into the world, I guess partly because they'd gone and won the World Cup afterwards. But it really seemed to cut him deep. Like, he's obviously lived here. He understands Irish rugby very well because he spent, 18 months at Munster. And then there's all these connections. Like, he's had Felix Jones in, Jerry Flannery's there now. They've got an Irish analyst called Paddy O'Sullivan. Nienaber is working with Leinster. The Irish players, 12 of what we expect to be the starting team have been working under the Nienaber defence system for better or worse this season. They've got insights into the South African mindset. Like, it's got a lot of the different seeds that kind of will grow into a rivalry naturally. Like, we may be a complete, a whole world away from each other on separate continents, separated by an equator. But like, our rugby worlds have never been closer together. And I think that familiarity has bred a real contempt. And I don't get the sense that these two teams particularly like each other either. So it's great. Like, this is Ireland. Ireland used to slip into South Africa and slip out of South Africa, and they barely noticed. Like, they beat Ireland in the games, and it was all over. This is what happens when you have the world's attention. They don't like being beaten, and Ireland have beaten the Springboks team the last 3 times. They won here with 14 men the last time they were here, and kind of blew the series with a weakened team. Like, Luke was one of the lads who got injured on the eve of the tournament. I think if himself, Johnny Sexton, Rob Kearney, and Dave Kearney hadn't got injured on the eve of the tour, they might have got it over the line. So, like, I think it's a good thing that South Africa have got that Ireland are in that South African minds so much. It's a real sign of respect in many ways, even though it doesn't come across as very respectful sometimes. And it makes next Saturday just so exciting.
It is funny, like, the idea, like, if you even go back 10 years, that like Ireland South Africa would be such a keen rivalry. It does show how far Irish rugby is coming. Likewise, when I mentioned the All Blacks earlier, how that's become such a nip and tuck rivalry. Obviously, they won the World Cup meetings, but Ireland have taken some big scalps as well. It does show us how the step forwards that have been taken in the last 10 years in particular at international level, that they are proper rivalries now. South Africa, as Rudd said, it might not feel respectful, but it is respect. Like, they are treating Ireland very much as equals. It's not like small Ireland going down there. They might be lucky to win a game, albeit it looks like a daunting task. Like, Ireland are very much meeting these, international powerhouses now as equals.
In my mind, probably not just as equals. I think you have to win a World Cup, I think, down there. Like, they're a bit ahead there. So I think they always feel like they have that edge on Ireland, and New Zealand would probably feel the same way, that when it comes to crunch, Ireland haven't really been able to produce. New Zealand obviously got over that hump. That was a long wait from 87. But Ireland have yet to do that, yet to get to a semi-final. So I think they'll always have, there's a little bit in their mind, they just think that they have the edge. And I think they're probably right, let's face it. But certainly they know that this Ireland team can go ahead and beat them outside of World Cup, like inside these World Cup cycles. They can definitely beat them, and they've proven that. And I think you're right; they deserve to be taken, to be treated with respect, and to be. I think they're. In my own mind, I probably like. I think South Africa are kind of worried about this Irish team and this style of play. I think they think there's something there, and I think they feel like this. While they won the World Cup, if you were looking at it from a South African perspective, Ireland have caused them real trouble. They have not been able to kind of turn this Irish team over, and I think to my mind, I think this rivalry goes on even beyond this tour, because I think they need to beat Ireland in Ireland, and they haven't done that for quite a while. They really haven't done that for quite a while. So I think they'll go, well, okay, it's honours even now. Once it's not honours even, we're back in the game. If I was South Africa now, I'd be looking saying, we're back in the game if we win this test series, but we need to go to Ireland and get a win. I think that, to my mind, kind of completes this and rounds out this team's achievements. I think Ireland are bloody hard. They're one of the hardest teams, I think, to beat away from home. And I think this is kind of like them getting back into the fight, because Ireland have had the edge in this fixture for quite a while. You know, whatever they say about the World Cup, there's no way they'd have wanted to be coming out of that group second, because they were likely to be playing France. And they got a few lucky breaks against France, I think. You know, a few very weird tries that got them over the line in that one. So, yeah, I don't know. I love this rivalry. I think it's great. I think it'll keep going on. I think Ireland, I would go a step further and say it's not just Ireland's work in the last 10 years that's put them in this position. I think it's the work from the last 20 years. I think behind the scenes, I think how they've organised the game from a professional standpoint has really positioned Ireland to be consistently really good. And I think that's always the thing like as Irish rugby supporters, we always thought, you know, like we're capable of that big one. But can we do it consistently? And I would say that's been the most impressive thing for me. And I think that's why we're at the table now. That's why we're there competing. That's why we're talking about winning a World Cup, or being the best team in the world, and should be able to deliver a World Cup. I think it's deserved, but I think the work goes back longer than that. So a lot of people, too many to mention to kind of say, to pat on the back. But it's a great position to be in. I love that at the end of the year, we're all, like, we used to, like, as a supporter, you were watching these ones going, oh, like this could, like, going into New Zealand, you're thinking, is there a 60-pointer in the works here? Same probably for South Africa. Probably couldn't say the same for Australia the last 10 years, but prior to that, when they had some great teams, you're thinking the same thing. I think those days are gone, I hope. I don't want to eat my words here, but I really think those days are gone. And long may it continue. It's so exciting to have something like this at the end of the year, isn't it?
Yeah, and like South Africa said, kind of their stall out earlier today by naming their team. Just quick spin through the starting team for people who mightn't have seen it. Like front row, Oxenitcha and Bonambi and Vincent Koch. Mostert Netsabet in the second row. Khaleesi the captain. Peter Steph-Tutoy and Quagga Smith, who was maybe slightly surprised selection at number 8. Faf de Klerk and Andre Pollard at half-back. Dialende and Creel in the centre. And then Willie LaRue at full-back and Colby and Arenza on the wings. Quite formidable, and with a 6-2 split as well. Like, are you feeling any different about things, maybe having seen the team that they actually picked?
Like, it's kind of along reasonably expected lines. Yeah, Quagga Smith ahead of Evan Roos. I'm talking to the locals. They're not that surprised by that. I probably was. Just, Roos played well against Wales, and he's a fine player, but he obviously just hasn't earned the trust of the inner sanctum. And in fairness, that Quagga Smith's one of the best players in the world. Like, we don't see him that often because he plays in Japan and he comes off the bench for the Boks. But he is, like, his performance in the World Cup knockouts was phenomenal. And I think within the game, he is really, really respected, like, as a top end open side. Now, he's playing number 8 in this game, but he can do that. He played sevens. He's a phenomenal athlete. He can do everything, really. So it doesn't weaken them. Like, they're obviously missing a few bodies, but like the caliber of players that they're able to call up is very strong. They have the best depth, I think, of any team in international rugby. They've 300 or 400 players based in England, France, Japan, Ireland, across the world, basically. And then, plus the franchises we see, even a few Currie Cup teams as well. So they've more professional players out there, really, than anyone else, maybe apart from France, and probably a higher caliber. I love the fact that they go early with the team. Ireland are trying to stop people spying at training. Just name the team. Like, Andy Farrell came in first and he said, I'm not going to, this doesn't matter to me. And he named his team on a Tuesday, and he's changed that now. Rassie's just like, here's the team, try and beat us. Like, I just think that approach is so much healthier and just leads to a lack. There's no wasted energy involved in it. It's just clarity from early in the week. Everyone knows what they're doing and how they're going to do it, and I don't think it weakens them at all. And it's a bloody good team. Yeah, 20 of them played in the World Cup final. They've got Pollard. Like, Ireland, if Pollard had started either of the last 2 games, rather than Damien Valemsa in Dublin or Manny Libok in Paris, both of whom had kicking nightmares, they potentially get over the line because Pollard's a better goal kicker, and that Ireland can't rely on the Boks missing their kicks this time. That was a big factor in both of those games. So yeah, I think like the Boks are going to be full noise for it. They have a really good team. Like Ireland will have a strong team, but I do think that their lack of depth in comparison to South Africa will hurt them in the positions that they're missing. The three backs that they're missing, Mac Hansen, Keenan and Gibson Park, they've all been really key players to beat in the Boks in recent years. Like Mac Hansen's been the difference maker in two of those games in terms of just having that moment of magic to score the tries to get them over the line. Gibson Park's tempo is so integral to what Ireland do. Keenan's surety at the back, it's like they've good players coming in, but I don't know if they're at the level that those guys are at. And like you're going to have to see kind of career best performances from a couple of players, I think, to fill those gaps.
Yeah, the back three did jump out to me when I saw it selected today, especially seeing Willie Leroux, the way he pulled Leinster around with his kicking game against for the Bulls in that semi-final, and he obviously missed the final, and he was a massive loss against Glasgow. That's one area that Jimmy O'Brien presumably it looks like he'll be playing full back. We'll have James Lowe and Calvin Nash. Would that be an area of concern for you?
I don't think it's an area of concern. I just don't think it has the same potency. I think Keenan's ability to ball play is probably a little bit underrated in his game. I don't hear people talking about that. He really does open up the pitch for his wingers or for anyone who's outside him. He's got great pace, that top end pace, and that fitness. And he has great positioning. So, and I think he's a bit better in the air. Even though I think. I like Jimmy O'Brien in that respect. He had a shaky finish to the season for Leinster, but generally speaking, I think he's quite good in the air. There's a difference between him and Keenan. So, I think you always miss that, and Keenan's a huge loss for me. And of course, he has got that running threat as well. He's a big running threat. So, I think they will miss him. But I think Ireland are still solid there. I don't think they need to worry. I think this South African back three will cause anyone trouble. They've got that pace, and they're very strong too, even for kind of smaller guys. They're good defenders as well, because it's a very, very difficult kind of. We don't know if it's going to be the same defensive system. We're assuming it will be. I think that's just how South Africa defend, in fairness, with a few tweaks from different coaches along the way. But they're very smart that way as well. You know what I mean? It's hard to expose them. So they have their work cut out, but I still think they have their own strengths, and they're still a good outfit. But you certainly would Hansen. I think what you really miss with Hansen is the other pair of hands, because I think. What you do get with Ireland's, it sounds like a weird place to go, but what you do get with Ireland's centre partnerships is very, very physical, very, very fit, and good runners with the ball. But I don't think you could really say about any of those players that they're a good playmaker. So it means that you're very, very reliant on your 10 or your 9 to kind of create opportunities. Or Keenan, I think, to create opportunities and open up the pitch for you. Mac Hansen is another one of those guys. When he's in the team, he opens up the pitch and he can get the ball away in kind of different circumstances, and he makes it difficult to defend against you. And he can, you don't just have to worry if you're coming up hard to defend Ireland or to defend, like I say, a Mac Hansen or a Hugo Keane. You don't just have to worry about tackling him. You've got to worry about him getting the ball away to someone in a better position if you're coming really hard. And there's no recovering, remember, if you're coming that hard off the line like the South Africans do. So that indecision creates opportunity, and not having that, I think, just simplifies the task for the South Africans in that respect. And I think that's probably where you really miss those guys, is just the ball playing ability, and the indecision it causes for the opposition, and the opportunities then that you have off the back of it, because it's not just opportunities to play outside them or play inside them. It opens up kicking opportunities and all sorts of things too, So there's other parts of this, like missing kind of complete players that can open up the pitch and pass well. It has knock-on effects for every part of your attacking game. It's not just like breaking the line. So that's where I think they'll miss them the most. Will I still think it's solid, but there is a difference.
Yeah, one area it'll be interesting to look at. Rod, I don't know if you've gotten a sense over in South Africa. Siya Kolisi, obviously named captain. He's gotten a lot of criticism from his own. As the owner from Racing, Jackie Lorenzetti, saying he was out of shape and has been basically a bust since he came to Racing 92. Are people in South Africa, do they want him back in the team? Do they think he's out of form, that he shouldn't be the captain anymore? What's the sense you've gotten over there, or do you think yourself from having seen him a bit this year?
Siya Kolisi is probably the most popular person in South Africa. I think people would be very upset if he was moved on. like he wouldn't be the first person to head off to Europe from the South African squad and have a bit of a year off, and then come back in and perform when he gets into that Springbok setup. I can think of a couple who spent time in this neck of the woods who've done that as well. So like there's, I think there's a risk signing current Springboks, because I think what is top of their minds and what they are most motivated to do is win for South Africa. It's the ultimate for them. And yes, they can go off and earn a lot of money in Paris and have a lovely lifestyle, but ultimately what they want to do is come back at the end of the year and be Boks again. So I'd expect like. What Lawrence Eddy said was in Irish, like you could never imagine anyone from an Irish province coming out and saying nothing like that.
It was outrageously like critical and like
it was. I mean, it was quite typical for a French owner. And in fairness, the fella puts all his money into that club, so I guess he's entitled to it. But it was, I'm sure it will give. I mean, for a team who look for external motivation a lot, that's just going to be fuel to Khaleesi's fire. So, and he loves this team. He's part of a back, like Peter Steph Toy is, probably the best player in the world. They've got Quagga Smith, who I've already raved about. So he knows his job. And he's also, he's got that second row partnership that are so effective. They're part of that scrum. It's a really strong unit. So he knows the system. I don't have a doubt about him performing. I don't see him as any sort of weak link. I don't see really any weak link in this team. I think to beat them, you just have to play incredibly well. I don't obviously every team has some sort of softness somewhere, but I don't see him as being someone you can get at or something like that. I think he'll turn up, he'll perform. And if he's not, Rassie's ruthless. He'll take him out. And like they have the 6'2" benchmark. Marco van Staden's been playing very well for the Bulls. They've Snyman there as well if they want to bring him on at 6. They've got options. They've plenty of options. They're not short of those. So I don't see him, and I think he'll play. I'm sorry, obviously he'll play. He'll captain the team. He'll do it with pride, and he'll perform.
One thing that came out of the selection today with them going 6-2 is what it might mean for Ireland. Do you think they should go with a 6-2 split, or with Robbie Henshaw, Ringrose, and Aki all being fit? Is it worth having? Maybe it looks like maybe Robbie Henshaw as the number 23.
I'm really, really torn on this one, I have to say. But when I see the strength of that Bok pack, part of me always thinks you've got to try and get as much, got to try and get as close to that as possible. And I do think a 6-2 is probably the most sensible thing to do away from home. The other part which I referred to is kind of screaming out saying, well, don't get drawn into that game with them. You know what I mean? Like, it's nice to have, like, you can still make a big impact as a back coming on the pitch fresh, with 20-25 minutes to go.
Especially someone like Robbie Henshaw.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I like, it's a difficult one, and it means you probably, well, I think he's stuck with Frawley at 10 anyway, just because the way he selected the squad. I was going to say, but it gives you great flexibility if you have Frawley there, my heart, my head says I think he'll go 6-2. My heart says, like, should you be drawn into it, and should you just play your own game and kind of back what you're great at, and do you just pick a great player because he's a great player and he's so consistent for you. So as I said, I think I'm leaning towards my head on it and saying 6-2 is the sensible one, but part of me says, could you leave Robbie Henshaw off? And I think I'd hate to see him miss out. And he could play a big part. He centres. Nowadays they're so physical. And they're good in the ground. They can get you turnover. They're almost like another back row out there. So I don't know. He could have a big impact in the game too. Well, it's a difficult decision for Andy Farrell, actually.
Yeah, Ruaidhri, what's your take on it? Like, from looking at the squad, like, missing Jack Conan for me is massive in that regard. I think if he was there, I'd be more leaning towards 6-2 and maybe have him and Ryan Baird as those two additional forward options, with James Ryan as a second row sub, Ty Byrne and Joe McCarthy starting, and then the back row of Mahoney, Van der Fleer and Doris is what it looks like it's going to be. But without Jack Conan's ball carrying, are you going what? Are you going Baird and Nick Timoney? I'm not sure if that's the oomph that is good enough for me to drop someone like Robbie Henshaw and the impact he can have.
Is it Shuku in there for you? No, ahead of...
Yeah, it's a Shuku. Yeah, but that would be who would have a bigger impact this weekend? Is it Shuku or Robbie Henshaw? That's an interesting debate. I like the idea, you mentioned that last week, of that wild card element of Shuku having not really played. Sorry, he hasn't played for Ireland yet, obviously, but not even played a huge amount of big club matches, so he will be a little bit unmapped, and that bit of uncertainty, I could see him coming on on the high veld and having a real big game.
He looks like he'd be well suited to it.
So that would be my guy. If he is the extra 6 guy, I would be open to it. But if it's not him, and if it's Nick Timoney or Keane Prendergast or someone like that, I don't think you're getting enough out of that potentially to leave out Robbie Henshaw. Ruud, what's your perspective on that? And if you do think 6'2", what do you think the identity of that extra person might be?
Like, I think it would be ridiculously harsh to leave Robbie Henshaw out, given he's been one of Leinster's best players in the last while, and it's only just because Mundiaki is still the player that he is, and that Ringrose is fit and offers a better balance, that you're leaving him out. And when Farrell's had all three of them available, he's always gone 5-3. Even the last Six Nations game, he reverted to 5-3 when Ringrose was fit again. So I think you go with Henshaw. He's like, the last time he was down here, obviously he played for Leinster a couple of weeks ago, but he played test rugby for the Lions a couple of years ago, and he was outstanding against South Africa. He offers you so much. He's experienced. He's a leader. He's a world class player in his own right. Like, so I think he can go toe to toe with the box. And you're right. Look, I think Timoney's actually in incredible form. He was probably Ulster's best player this season, and he finished the season really, really strong. And he's probably earned a shot at some stage to get it go. But I would go with Henshaw with his experience over prioritising a Timoney. I think it's a Chukwu. There's definitely an argument. Like, there's an argument made for starting James Ryan. There's argument to be made for playing as a Chukwu to freshen things up. Like, if Farrell has detected a staleness that I think was on evidence towards the end of the Six Nations, that certainly there seemed to be at the end of the provincial season. Well, do you freshen things up by getting someone completely new in? I think maybe that's a second test play. I don't see them doing it in the first test. I think he has such trust in his men. He likes players to have a couple of camps before they get an opportunity. And Izuchuku, while he was on the Emerging Ireland Tour, he's never been in a senior Ireland camp before, but they like what they see. They do. He has impressed them, and he obviously is an incredible physical specimen. He's been training a lot at lock rather than at 6. I mean, could he be putting pressure on Baird? Like, Baird didn't finish the season well. Like, he had a good season right up until the last couple of weeks, but he's tailed off quite significantly and had a poor game against the Bulls. Made a lot of mistakes that day. So there's an argument for that, but I guess Baird comes in with the jersey. Has he done enough to lose it?
Baird's an interesting one, isn't it? Like, I think Baird, this is a big tour for Baird, I think, Rose. Have you a sense that, like, to my mind, he's perfectly built for these conditions. If he's playing like we know he could play, but feels like a big one to me. I think he needs to play well.
Didn't have a good end of season.
It's all mental with Ryan Baird, and like he has added some things to his game this year that he didn't have before. He's become a really destructive line-out forward on the opposition's ball. And even in the games where he was struggling for Leinster towards the end of the season, he was winning big balls against the head. Like, it was such an asset for Leinster, but he made too many mistakes. I think against the Bulls in particular, he had a very error-strewn game. He switches off, I think, at times. Like, I'm a big fan of his. Like, he has the raw materials to be one of the best players out there. And he is built like a South African. Like, he is built to go toe to toe with Peter Steph Toy, and I'm sure they're drilling that into him if he is playing this weekend. But Izuchuku is built very well as well, and Tom Ahern is coming as well. So it's not like he's going to have that selection all his own way. It would be an awful shame for Irish rugby if he produced a specimen like Ryan Baird and you weren't able to get him to his full potential. But he has to do the work, and he has to perform when he's picked. So you're right, Luke. I think this is a big window for him because he had earned the trust of the coaches. Like, he lost his way in the World Cup. He didn't get selected for that New Zealand game, and McCarthy got selected ahead of him, even though he was completely new at the time. And Baird came into that World Cup like as a bench option and played against South Africa off the bench and lost his place. But he'd earned the trust again during the Six Nations. He had a good Six Nations, and he was having a good season for Leinster, but it just tailed off in recent weeks. And I think I agree with your sense of that. I think this is it's a big opportunity for him to show what he can do in a the rugby world's eyes are on these games. It's the biggest stage you're going to get, and if he's not stepping up and relishing that, then maybe he's never going to. But it's all there for him. He just needs to put it all together.
I think this place really suits him. I think if there's hard grounds, like, he's the best. He's probably the best athlete at both packs in terms of just top end pace. Like, he's so quick. if he switched on, if he doesn't make the mistakes like we saw at the end of the season, and they were kind of bloopers, like the one where he doesn't chase Sheehan chasing that crossfield kick from the set play, he stops running when Sheehan knocks it back into play. That's a potential try there. The run across the line against, like running sideways against a professional rugby team against Northampton close to his line.
Top kick-off against the Bulls was a killer. I think Leinster just got back to a tie game.
So he's better than that. Like, he's a brilliant athlete. He's a brilliant player. I think the potential is really there. This place is a kind of place that should really suit his style of play. I hope that he goes out there is just thinking, I'm going to be really, really robust and physical here. I'm going to run as hard as I can for however long I get to show my wares on the pitch. And I think I agree with Ruds. There's two ways to look at this. Either way, it's a massive tour for him, but I think he could cement his place here. I think this is where, if you could play great rugby in South Africa, I think it separates the men from the boys to a certain extent, So this is a big one for him, and it could be a breakout for him if he goes well,
So, Rud, like when we reconvene after the game and we're chatting through things, if Ireland have secured a famous win down in South Africa, what do you think will be the key things that we'll be discussing? What will be the areas that Ireland got really right, or that Ireland attacked South Africa in, or were able to kind of withstand South Africa in whatever area?
Well, I think set piece will have to be on point. If the scrum is undermined in the way that the Bulls undermined the Leinster scrum a couple of weeks ago, you can forget about it. You go home. Like, there's no point. You've got to, like, over here, you've got to stand up and scrummage. And Ireland scrummage a different way to Leinster, even though there's a lot of the same players. I think they'll look to hold their own rather than try and be aggressive in the way that Leinster have been, which was great against Toulouse in the final. But I think against South Africans, especially this South African pack, you've got to survive. Like, you've got to just get parity and play off the back of it. Your line-out has to be better than it has been. Ireland's line-out's been a bit of a tricky thing for them over the last year against South Africa in the World Cup game. Like, a couple went astray. Like, they want to be mauling. They want to get that set piece platform. So that I don't know if they're going to go Casey or Murray. That's the other big question. But like, that they want to play off good line-out ball. That's where the majority of their tries come from. They got Goodman on board for this tour. I don't know how much influence he's having, but he's a very good set piece play designer. And, they'll surely have a few moves up their sleeves. But if you can't get the ball cleanly out of the line out, well, then you're in trouble. Breakdowns, the other one. The teams that have beaten Ireland and Leinster in the last year have gone after them with the breakdown. And O'Connell was talking earlier about how it's become a bit more of a war zone. It's become a bit more old school in the way it's being refereed, and other teams are thriving in that they're just going in and trying to. They're just winning the collisions, winning the first arrivals. Like, Ireland used to pride themselves on being the best breakdown team in the world. They weren't against England, and they can get back to that point, but it's going to take a serious effort. And then they just got to be accurate. Like, Leinster's accuracy, and again, I shouldn't be drawing so many parallels between Ireland and Leinster, but there's so many of the same players. Like, we all saw what happened in the Champions Cup final. Like, they were in the 22 for half the game, and they couldn't score. They couldn't put the moves together to score. They're not going to get that same number of visits to the South African 22 when they get their opportunities. What's been so key to them beating South Africa in the times that they've done it in recent years is that when they got their chances, they took them. And it was like in Dublin, it was like that maul trick play where Van der Fleer darted down the blind side and dived over. Like, they just got to be ruthless when they get their opportunities. And then they got to front up in defence. And I think we're going to see a little bit of different stuff from South Africa. Tony Brown is in there now, and he's the former Japan coach, ex-All Black, one of the highest regarded attack coaches in the world. He won't have had much time to put together a lot, but I'm sure he'll come up with something to try and challenge Ireland to kind of pull them apart. I'm already mentioning every area of the game there.
I'm just going to say, so basically everything runs.
Perfect performance. Ireland turn in the perfect performance if this all goes well.
Yeah, no, you are right though. Like, they're a very complete
team.
It's the ultimate
test.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, like, it's the ultimate stress test of what you've got. And my worry is that Ireland's form is not good. That there's a lot of players travelling over not in great form, and that's like, we're going to have to see like players like Caelan Doris, like Joe McCarthy, like Dan Sheehan get back to their World Cup levels 13 months into their season. Like, that's a worry, I think. And also the missing players. We're going to see Calvin Ash have the game of his life. We're going to see Jimmy O'Brien establish himself as an international fullback of some renown. Like, if it's Craig Casey, this is it, Craig. You've been in the squad for 3 years. This is your time. You've been learning underneath the two lads for the last couple of years. He's been basically an apprentice for a couple of years. I'm sure he's wanted this opportunity. Well, now he's got to set the tempo against the Bucks. He's got to be brave. He's got to make the pass. He's got to make, kick when it's right to kick. Like, there's so many lads coming in who have to have a huge performance. Look, the Bucks have to be good as well. And I think there's a chance that they lose their cool. They're very hyped, and that could work against them. So, but it's more of a stretch to see Ireland produce the performance in my mind that's needed. Not that they can't do it. The first game of the Six Nations, I was tipping France to win it. Nearly everyone was. And they came out and they blew them out of the water in Marseille. A performance a few of us saw coming.
Well, the red card helps. The red card helps, fairness,
Yeah, but they were doing well before the red card. Like, that performance was accurate. It was intense. They hit all the right notes. We just haven't seen them get to that level in months.
I think, like, if you're asking, just to tie in, because it is such an interesting point about what does an Ireland win look like. The point I would hone in on is, because I think they're going to struggle at scrum, but line out, like, they need to get that sorted out. Like, that was a really poor part of Leinster's game for the end of the season. I don't care what anyone says. The stats might be decent or something like that, but if watching it, looks clunky.
And it didn't look like it was game as well. It was under massive pressure.
Oh yeah, massive. But sorry, they'd had some throwing issues just before that, remember? And I think then South Africa really decided to go after it. And I don't know whether it was because they had figured it out or they had decided they were going to put pressure on the throws, because the throwing pre-tournament had been very shaky, if you remember. So whatever happened there, it meant every team started going after that area, and it's only gotten worse since. Whether it's the confidence level of whoever's throwing in, or just the clunkiness and trying to be maybe too smart in the line, or whatever it is. They haven't been able to get really slick ball at the tail or in the middle to really attack from, and that's always a good basis for if you think about Ireland and where Ireland have been great, like consistently. I talk about consistency and how Ireland have been really good consistently. Generally speaking, a lot of that has revolved around being very, very smart around set plays and being really, really effective at getting points there, whether that's through a penalty or breaking a team down with a try. The line-out's been really, really key to that for a very long period of time for Irish teams. And I think that hasn't been great. So I think that has to be really great. And I think you've got to kick really, really well down in South Africa. I agree with Rhodes. You could go through everything. I'm not going to do that. But there are 2 points where I think if you've done those two things well, I think Ireland have enough, because I think they'll get their attack right. But I think those two things are really, really important. And that's not just kicking, out of hand. I think Crowley's got to nail every kick off the deck that you get, because I think they will give you opportunities with penalties. I think they have that discipline. They have that streak in them. And I think Rhodes is right, and I mentioned it earlier on. It's a nice way to play into that. If they're all hyped up for it. Like, Steve Cleese was very lucky not to get a red card in that semi-final, or the final against New Zealand as well. So they have those moments in them too. So don't be afraid to let them make the mistake as well. So calm heads could prevail here. So huge test.
Yeah.
But there are ways into it. There's ways you can get at the South African team. They're not infallible. They've remember, we beat them the last time we played them. So Yeah, and like there must be a degree of pressure, I would argue, on South Africa as well. They're putting a lot of pressure on themselves with all their talk that we referred to earlier about how they're putting this game on a pedestal as 1 versus 2 in the world. I don't think it can be just taken as a given that they will automatically roll out and be unbelievably good. Now it's pointing that way. I would agree when you see the team sheet. They're at home, first game as world champions in front of a crowd and their home crowd and stuff like that. But they only won every knockout game by a point. It's not as if they pulverised teams like the way the All Blacks did en route to maybe winning in 2015 in most of their matches. So, there's a bit of pressure on them to deliver their best performance too, I'd say.
Yeah, and you got to also understand that in 2020 they never got to have this homecoming. This is a big deal for them. They COVID denied them the chance to play in South Africa as world champions in front of a crowd for nearly 3 years, and I think that's a big motivating factor for them this week, is that they're home. They're coming home as world champions, and they're building this up massively in their minds. The hope, I suppose, for them is that they'll get a performance out of that. But of course, that could become too much or could get on top of them. Look, I think we know that their mentality is pretty strong. They are a winning machine, but they're not impenetrable, as Luke said. And they don't always hit the high notes. I guess their game style sometimes, it's just not as explosive. It's more of a slow poison approach. They wear teams down. They beat them across 80 minutes. They don't mind being behind as long as they know that their physicality is wearing a team down and they can get them in the end with that bench. But I think they want to put on a bit of a show as well. They want to the fact that they sold it out. There's a lot going on for South Africa in this tour. they put a lot of pressure on themselves. I know Ireland talk about inspiring a nation, but when you like South Africa is a very different country with so many different challenges, and they put a lot on their own backs about giving hope and giving joy to that country. So like it's a burden, it's a privilege. They often thrive with it. But yeah, you're right. Like if Ireland get on top of them, if Ireland get ahead, then that could go against them. That could kind of get on top of them and get in their heads. So there is a different pressure, and you're right. They've put a lot of it on themselves. They haven't been slow about talking these games up, so they've got to deliver now. Problem is they generally tend to deliver, but so do Ireland. Like that's why they've been the two best teams in the world over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's set up to be an absolute cracker. Just before we get predictions, guys, a kind of a quick moment of the week in association with Bank of Ireland. Guys, my moment of the week was when Leinster drew La Rochelle in today's Champions Cup draw. And talking about...
I thought you were going something different.
I was going to
take your one.
I've changed my mind. You can take mine. But it's funny, we were talking about, Rudd said earlier about, can the guys deliver a performance after whatever month of the season? We've gotten to the stage of the season where they're now drawing next year's Champions Cup when the season is still ongoing this year and they've only just played the final last year. Like, I'd forgive the lads if they were a bit jet-lagged from South Africa being like, what time zone am I in? They're listening to this. But Leinster drew La Rochelle, Clermont, Bath and Bristol. Munster drew Northampton, Saracens, Stade Francais and Castres, and Ulster drew Toulouse, Bordeaux, Leicester and Exeter. Lots of exciting games, Luke, to look forward to. Obviously, we don't have to preview this.
I'm exhausted, Will. I can't. I'm not ready to be excited.
It's Leinster, La Rochelle, that's all I'll say.
Yeah, can't wait for that one, in fairness. And they look like, Raj looks like he's got a bit of a rebuilding job to do there, so... yeah, I think they'll come back. I back him to get that right. I love the way he's so introspective and he's looking at himself, first. Because I think that's just, anyone who's great at anything always does that first, and I expect him to get them back kind of motoring next year. And interested to see, if Leinster's new recruits can have a bit of an impact there as well. So that's a really tasty one, isn't it?
Oh, Leinster, La Rochelle, I was so happy to see that. Like, part of me is like, am I a little fatigued from it? Nah. You couldn't be fatigued from something like that.
Take it easy, Will.
Yeah, it's not like Munster Cast. That I'm like, I saw it.
Leinster Cast for one.
Munster played Cast 18 times in the Champions Cup. It's the most played match of any teams. I was like, God. I
felt like we played them a lot as well. We had a terrible. We lost a few terrible.
How do Cast always qualify? They're just good enough to qualify, but never good enough to
even. It's an annoying fixture though. They always beat you somewhere where you need they were a nightmare fixture away from home. Kind of stodgy pitch. You never played them in good conditions. It was a disaster for fixture.
A good cheese spread in the press box, I think.
Correct,
to
actually.
Tracy. The president came in with a nice cheese board. Like, was it last year, 2 years ago? What was your moment of the week? Do you have one?
I'm going to rob your one. I thought we were just
my original one.
Yeah, original one was the DuPont try. Yeah. Everyone was calling it from a set piece, but it wasn't. It was just magic from an individual that's just can do no wrong. I honestly think, and I know there's the recency bias that always goes on with everything that you do. Messi is the best ever, Ronaldo is the best ever, whatever. LeBron is the best ever. But I honestly do think that this guy might be the best ever. DuPont is just he can just do everything,
and he's touching the ball at every ruck.
Which is great, there's a great thing in that. That's a lovely thing as a player. I used to hate that playing on the wing, that you could go 15 minutes if it's a stodgy game without touching the ball. It's a killer. To try and get in, there's a real skill to being staying focused and calm when you get one chance every 10 minutes. There is a skill to that, trust me. But and it would have been lovely to have had the ball in your hands so much. At the start of the game, he's got in, he's settled into the game. So I envy sometimes the kind of playmakers of that. I think lots of players on a rugby pitch do. So I think that's an advantage to playing well. But what I would say is so much of his play is so good. And then you get to these other moments where it's kind of unstructured play, where it's he's taken this unbelievable support line. He, gets the ball out of broken play, has a cross-field kick to the, that's perfect. He turns over, he comes up with a key turnover, about 2 or 3 of them in the Champions Cup final. And then he has this other moment, where he chips it over the top, against Bordeaux. You're like a ball, the change of pace when he sees the opportunity, because I thought Bordeaux actually defended it quite well, the set play, but they get an offload away, change of pace. And the chip, he's just unstoppable, isn't he? He's so quick as well.
One thing that's really stood out to me in the last couple of weeks and watching him, and as good as all the things you mentioned, is his clearance kicks have been so ridiculous. These big raking clearance kicks going 50 metres as well.
In the final, they were unbelievable.
Yeah, and he had a couple at the weekend. I know they ended up hammering Bordeaux, but
there's nothing he can't do. Do you know what I mean? I always used to say McCaw is the best ever for me. But I just think he's overtaken him. I wish he had the World Cup now behind him to kind of cement it. People, I think, will throw that back in his face a bit. But as a pure rugby player,
He'll have another chance or two anyway, hopefully, at a World Cup.
unbelievable, isn't he?
He's unbelievable. And to give credit to Toulouse generally, like so many of their players the last couple of weeks when I've watched them, because they beat La Rochelle the previous weekend, obviously beat Leinster as well in the final. Like Jack Willis has been unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Like Alexander Ruaidhri, I know I doubted you when you said before the Champions Cup final you were touting him as one of the top number 8s. I said, Ruaidhri, no, you're definitely wrong here. And I said a grovelling apology and said you were, well, privately, of course, I wouldn't say that on air, but I said you were right and I was wrong. But they've been absolutely sensational. I think one of the great European, now that they've done the double, I think you could put them up as one of the real top European teams, just the way they've kind of finished out the season. Rod, I don't know if you have a moment or if you want to weigh in on the Champions Cup draw or anything we discussed there.
My moment of the week was when my bag arrived today. After I arrived, BA lost my bag, having also put us they overbooked our flight by 16 people on the way over. One of my colleagues had to go via Nairobi. Another one is still waiting for his bag, so I got lucky today. So no, I would have gone with I think it's in a weekend where there wasn't a whole lot of rugby. I think I would have gone with DuPont as well. Like what a try. The draw, I can't think about the Champions Cup. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous.
I have Champions Cup fever already.
I'm exhausted. Yeah.
Look, let's keep some stuff back for next season. La Rochelle Legends was great. I've never been to Bath. I've never been to Claremont. I hope to get over to at least one of those. So, it'll be great.
Claremont's unbelievable. The Rec, they're both great. Yeah. The Rec is great too. The Rec is now, it's kind of wet and it's not an unbelievable pitch, but it's just got great tradition and it's gorgeous around the stadium. Claremont. Magic. Got
to be a good cheese board there as well, surely, by the president. That looks like a place.
Yeah.
No, to be fair, we're not going to preview these games now, but there's some good looking fixtures there. Like Munster and Saracens, I know it'll be a new era for Saracens.
Oh, well, stop.
Oh, you just stop before you just let's end the show. I've just about got enough left in the tank.
You brought up the World Cup last week, and now I'm getting stick for bringing up the Champions Cup. At least this is this year. You were talking about
it up once though. Now you can't help it. Once you've looked at the fixtures, now you're going.
I am. There's a couple of tasty ones.
Oh yeah, no.
Look, I won't start into Munster cast chat. We'll say Munster cast chat for next year. Okay, we'll finish up with our predictions for this weekend. This is the kind of one for me. If I'm going through the likely outcomes, I think outcome number 1 for me most likely is like a narrow South African win. Outcome number 2, probably a big South African win. I put an Ireland win below that one even. I think South Africa by double digits. I just think factors we touched on earlier. I don't think the Irish players are in good form. South Africa picked a very strong team. They're at home. That alone puts them in a good stead. I would have to see such a massive change in form and energy levels from what I saw from, again, I don't want to belabour the Leinster point, but they played the Bulls in Loftus 2 or 3 weeks ago, a Bulls team that's nowhere near as good as the South Africa team, and they looked a good bit off what would be required this weekend. Not impossible, and when I see the Ireland team, maybe it'll change my mind, but I think South Africa by 10 to 12 points is my initial feeling. Luke, what do you think?
No, I think South Africa by 3 points. I think it's going to be tight. I think the Irish players have had a good break, actually. I think that might have been just what they needed. I think they might have just enough in the tank to perform well in 2 test matches. And I'm going to say they do themselves justice, and it's like a 3-pointer. Could even be ahead at the end of the game. But I think South Africa might have just that little bit too much at home, that little bit too much power in the pack, I think, for kind of this Ireland team to contain it over 80 minutes. But that's my sense of it. I think the home thing will play as well. It has to. Pretoria is it's a tough place to go and play.
And one of the things, the narratives that formed in my head as we were talking was I could see a scenario where Ireland, say, lose by 10 points this weekend. And then next week, it's like Isashuku comes in and they put Casey at 9 instead of Murray. And they do kind of like in 2009 when they changed up the test team pretty considerably between test 1 and 2. I know the Lions didn't win that second test, but it was a much more competitive game, close game, and it was a great game. I could see something similar happen if Ireland don't go well this weekend. There's a massive change, or not a massive change. There's not that many players they could change, but a sprinkling of new.
In fairness, if Ugo hadn't dropped the ball over the line twice, it might have been a closer first test.
We don't need to go back. We're not going forward to the next season. We don't need to go back 15.
Had to get that in, yeah.
To be fair, I brought it up. Rod, you have the last word. How do you think this Saturday will go?
I don't think Ireland will win, but I think I can see a performance. I think that Luke's right. I think playing for Ireland and this setup that gets the best out of these players and has done for the last couple of years, and they've never not like this. They've rarely not delivered a performance for Andy Farrell. I worry a little bit that they're doing the same. They're kind of going rinse and repeat a little bit. What was it that Ian Foster described their attack as? The World Cup was a paint by numbers, cut and paste attack that other teams that they haven't maybe evolved quickly enough with it. But I think like Joe McCarthy's going to step up. I think I don't see the pack going too far backwards. I just with Pollard kicking his goals at altitude, the box with the bodies that are the Gibson Park such a huge loss, Keenan's such a huge loss, Hansen's such a huge loss, Conan's a big loss, and the depth isn't there to kind of cover those. And I just think the Box will have the strength across the 80, but I don't see it being a blowout. Yes, it could get out of hand. It can do at altitude, and they can get great energy off that crowd. And Ireland kind of melted in Twickenham away from home, and when the atmosphere ramped up in those last 2 minutes, that'd be a concern. But I mean, that Gary Keegan was up yesterday, and he's put a lot of work into their mental resilience, and they haven't become a bad team. I think they'll produce something. But yeah, my concern around form and the few bodies that are missing just tips it South Africa's way.
I think you're right on the probability of those results, Will. But what I would say is I think I'm going the tight one. But I think next week is what I'd be a little bit worried about. I think if they don't win this one, few injuries, I could see that one get
real end of season feel.
I think a bit of that. Yeah. So
well. Not the most uplifting note to finish on, but it's said to be an unbelievable game anyway. Already, as I said, the excitement levels are building. We have plenty more podcasts coming for you. Myself and Ruaidhri will be chatting through the team selection this Thursday. Then after the game on Saturday, myself, Ruaidhri and Keane will go through the game, and the next Tuesday we'll be back once again to look ahead to the second test, to digest the first test with Luke and all the other talking points. So until next time, thanks so much for listening, and goodbye.